was in the dark night of the soul for about 3 years, and it was incredibly painful and draining and difficult. I went through a really intense experience. I was in a really dark time of my life, but I wouldn't trade it for the world, because now that I've come out to the other side, I feel like a completely different person. I see things differently. I understand myself on a much, much deeper level. Just to think back, the way I was functioning, what I was thinking, just the experiences that I was having, it was very, very different. So I really feel like I needed to go through this deep purging, so to say, to be in this point in time and feel really good about myself and feel like I'm actually very self-aware and I'm choosing to function and to live my life in a conscious way. But I've gotten some comments on my first video asking about the suffering part, or also the purification stage of the dark night of the soul. And there were multiple people that said, okay, but can you get stuck in it? Because sometimes it feels like you can get stuck in just feeling so sad and heavy. And maybe the way I felt it, at least, is that I was stuck in this like victim mentality, where I felt that life was not happening for me, it was happening to me, and I couldn't understand why I needed to deal with all of these challenges. So I wanted to address those comments in this video as well. So the short answer, if you are looking for the short answer, can you get stuck in the suffering? Can you get stuck in the dark night of the soul experience? Absolutely. The best way I can liken it is to a toxic relationship, or a relationship that has turned toxic, that we might become used to, and we may become familiar with the suffering or with the unhealthy approach towards things. So with the dark night of the soul, of course, you have the 4 different stages, right? You have the awakening, where you're beginning to see your patterns and you're beginning to question a lot of things. Then you have the purification, which is kind of like the purging. It's your call to let go of a lot of the negative beliefs and patterns. And this is where a lot of the deep work starts. Then you have the illumination stage, where all of these new insights begin to make sense. You're beginning to put some puzzle pieces together. If you had to face yourself and your shadow side and a lot of negative ways of functioning, this is where you're beginning to make sense of things, and you're beginning to see a new you and a new future towards which you can step towards, or into which you can step into. And then the final stage is union, where you feel more whole yourself. You feel like you are creating a new version of yourself. You also can feel more at peace and one with the universe, with God, with whatever you prefer to call it. But essentially, the most important thing when you're going through the dark night of the soul is to keep moving through these 4 stages. I got stuck in the awakening and the purification stages, I would say, for a little longer than I would care to admit, because the first thing that I got stuck in is recognizing my patterns and having the awakening into my beliefs and things not working. And I became so good at recognizing myself, where I began to kind of internalize or rationalize a lot of the experiences that I was going through. So to give you an example, I struggled for most of my life to feel my emotions and to really feel like the deeper, heavier emotions like sadness, disappointment, hurt. I had completely blocked myself from them. So I was really good at feeling excitement and happiness and all the good feeling emotions, but I had completely cut myself off from feeling the really necessary feelings of grief and sadness and pain and so-called suffering. So when I was in the awakening stage, I would be very good at detaching emotionally from my experiences. So if I fell into a bad pattern, if I was in unhealthy relationships, I would just get stuck in my head, kind of commenting on what I was observing. Oh wow, look, I had this pattern and I just behaved in a healthy way. Oh look, I am in this dynamic and it's not serving me. But just because I kept having the awakenings, it doesn't lead to change, right? It doesn't mean that I'm actually going through the purification process and I'm letting it go, I'm releasing it, I'm working on changing it. And it also doesn't mean that I'm beginning to take new steps or form new habits that lead essentially to a different type of behavior. So you can definitely get stuck in the awakening process where you're constantly like, wow, look, I learned this new thing about myself. Look, I didn't recognize that I had this pattern, but now I recognize it. A lot of the times you see it in romantic relationships as well, right? Because they teach us a lot. So you might come across a person that is a major red flag and you know they're not good for you, and in your head you might say, oh wow, look at that, like this person triggers triggers me in a lot of intense ways, probably they're not very good for me, but then you still follow through and you might fall into relationships with these people as well. So just because you're having the awakenings, it doesn't mean that you're doing anything with it, which in its sense is like, how useful is it to be aware of something if you're not gonna act differently? It just becomes another way to keep yourself stuck in those patterns and those cycles, but just justify it that you're aware of it, but it doesn't change anything. So this is one of the stages that I got stuck in as well, and I remember talking to my therapist about it as well. And she said, you're so good at you understand yourself so well, like you're so aware of the patterns, but you're very uncomfortable in being in a behavior that will change them. And I was like, oh, right. I'm really comfortable in talking to myself about the things that I recognize in myself or what kind of patterns I'm catching, but I'm definitely uncomfortable in being in the behavior that will change them, in letting them go, in doing something about them. This is sometimes you see as well with people that love personal development books, and I do as well, and I definitely went through that phase where you keep buying new self-help books and personal development books and you're reading all of them, but then it becomes a hobby just to buy the personal development books and read them and collect them instead of buying a couple, really absorbing the information and then consistently practicing towards integrating that information. Now, moving on to the second stage, the purification stage, the stage where you are called to release the patterns, release the beliefs, to really take a look at yourself and in a sense, purge everything that is not serving you. This stage is definitely the most painful and difficult, and it requires a lot of work. It is not for the faint of heart, but if you commit and if you're being called to go through this process, there's a reason for it. So if you answer the call, really, once you get to the other side, you're not going to be the same person. But when it comes to the purification process, this is a lot what I was getting asked. Can you get stuck in this process? Can you get stuck in the purification stage? Can you get stuck in suffering? Can you just get stuck in all of these negative experiences, or let's better call it these intense, heavy emotions that you may be going through? And the answer is absolutely yes. Yes, you can get stuck in the purification stage. Yes, you can get stuck in suffering. I was stuck in suffering for way longer than I should have. And one of the mentors that I was working with as well really called me out on this. So as I started going through the dark night of the soul, she mentioned to me, make sure you have a really strong sense of community. Make sure you have a support system, whether it's a therapist or perhaps it was also the fact that I was working with her, just people that have gone through it and people that can support you through all of these intense experiences. So I had my therapist and I also had my mentor, my coach. And when I was about 1.5 years into the experience, she told me, when you descend, let me get my words right, when you descend and you go into this experience of the dark night of the soul, it's like you are descending into, in a sense, into your own personal hell, right? You are faced with a lot of shadow aspects of yourself. You are faced with a lot of things that are going to be confronting and uncomfortable. And when you go into this personal hell, she said, sometimes the darkness of it or the heaviness of it becomes very seductive and you tell yourself that you belong there. Just saying this right now gave me chills because I also had chills when she mentioned this to me the first time, that you may think you belong there. And this is how I felt. Throughout the dark night of the soul experience, I felt crazy, I felt insane, I felt like I was losing my mind just because there was so much to deal with. And I was really hard on myself. I was judging myself. I was not in a good state. I was trying to process a lot of information with myself. Everything was just like heaviness on steroids, so to say. So because I was so down and I was thinking, I am so messed up, why do I have so many issues, I'm never gonna get out of this, I became so comfortable in this negative suffering space that I believed for a period of time that this is where I belong. I was like, okay, this is just how my life is gonna be. I'm gonna be sad and unmotivated and in pain and disappointed and surrounded by certain experiences that were not making me feel good. And I told myself that I don't deserve anything better. This is just what I have to accept. And it became a bit of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like I was stuck in the suffering and the heaviness and criticizing myself for having certain patterns. And because I was in such a negative state, I would repeat the patterns, and then they would just reinforce the thoughts and the beliefs that I had about myself and the fact that I thought I belong in this quote unquote personal hell, and that this is where I need to be. So my coach called me out on it, and I said, you're totally right. I've been stuck in it. And instead of purging and looking at it and letting it go and working on different behaviors and working on stepping out of this darkness and this heaviness, I just got stuck in the mud, so to say. So after she pointed it out, I realized, okay, I am playing the victim here, and it is very, very important when you're in the purification stage to feel your emotions. You need to feel the grief, you need to feel the pain. You may, lose relationships and friendships and transition from one career to another. You may move physically from one place to another. You are going through so much change that the process of grieving and pain and letting go and dealing with disappointment, it is normal and it's expected, right? It's like you need to go through all of this growth in order, well, not necessarily growth, but you need to go through all of this heaviness to get to the stage of growth and to the stage of eventually illumination. But the most important thing is to keep moving through the stages. That's the whole process. You need to go through the cycle of awakening, purification, and then actually to go through beginning to integrate all of this information and taking steps towards new and better behaviors, thoughts, beliefs, and just ways of being. So all of this to say, the dark night of the soul is difficult, but if you are going through this right now, I commend you. I know it's difficult, but there's a reason why you're going through this. In the beginning, when I started going through it in 2020, it didn't make any sense. I had no idea why I need to go through this and why I need to experience so much pain and purification and purging. But now that I'm on the other side of it, I cannot imagine myself and my life without going through this intense and dark period, because I am so much stronger, I am so much more healthy, I am so much more conscious, and I look at things in a very, very different way. And my external environment, the people that are around me, have also changed drastically. So if you're going through this, I really wish I could give you a big hug, because I know how intense it is. But at the same time, there's a reason you're going through this. And the most important thing is to not get stuck in the suffering, to not get stuck in feeling like woe is me and this is never gonna end. Just keep going through the stages. Make sure you have a strong support system behind you. Make sure you have somebody else to talk to about this, especially if they've gone through the experience themselves as well. And just keep moving through it. Don't get stuck in the mud. Don't tell yourself that you belong and you deserve to be in this really heavy state. Take all of this pain, take all of this information that's coming to you, and become an alchemist. Change it into something different. Change it into something better. The most important thing is just to keep moving. If you still have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. I will get to all of them. I really hope this was helpful. And if you are on the journey, I really commend you. And I just want to let you know that you can get through this.